wondering how I got into this mix.
A person that I've seen in several different venues around the country, around the world. He's talking today about living your life practically as an anarchist, a voluntarist, a libertarian, a person who believes in freedom, peace, and he lives it himself. His name is Derrick Broze. Join me in welcoming Derrick Broze.
Thing on. What's up, Anarchapulco? Make some noise! All right. I've got a fun little thing here to play with. It's very simple. I'm trying not to screw it up. We're going to do some fun talks today. Before we get to that, if you've heard me speak, there's a way I like to start these talks off, and it helps me relax a little bit. Plus, this is the most people I think we've had at Acapulco so far. This is the biggest crowd I've talked to so far. And I'd like you guys all to howl with me, if you don't mind. Yeah, I'm part wolf, so I like to howl. I can't howl with you because last year I did it and I screwed up the sound. So if you don't mind, let's just take a deep breath together before we get into this. And when you release that breath, just let out a nice howl. Let's fill this whole place up, right? Thank you for making my dreams come true. All right, so my name is Derrick Broze. I know some of you are unfamiliar with who I am. Some of you know who I am. But we're going to talk about a self-assessment. That's the focus of my talk. It's really, I'll get into the title in just a moment. But before we get there, how do I make the slides pop up? There we go. Whoop, let's go. That's too early. Dang, there's supposed to be one before that with Donald Trump's face looking really silly on it. So just imagine Donald Trump's there for a moment. But it's been a year since I've been here, and it's been a very crazy year, 2017. I think if we're looking at any aspect of not just our movement, but the world, there's a lot of turmoil, a lot of division. Crypto's been, making mainstream news and all over the place, and there's a lot more people creating freedom in their own lives. Specifically, I would say, regarding politics, even though this is an apolitical movement, generally, politically, the country, the United States, and maybe other parts of the world as well have probably never been more divided due to the most recent puppet in charge, Donald Trump. And unfortunately, even some people within this movement, so to speak, maybe not so many people here, have also fallen prey to this trap. And a lot of people who some of us considered freedom-minded, anarchist, libertarian, just generally truth-seeking people have fallen, down for this deception. All of a sudden think that some guy is just going to come out of nowhere and beat the system and beat the people in control. I don't buy that for 1 second. And it's been unfortunate to see that. To see a lot of friends and people I considered family all of a sudden just start supporting the establishment. It's really disturbing. But there's also been some positive developments. Again, as I said, crypto's been growing. We got Ben Swan back. Give it up for Ben Swan. Ben Swan's back. Ben is, of course, speaking right after me, and Ben's been a good friend for several years, and I'm thankful he's back because we need him in the independent journalism space. But I'm also kind of a little bit sour about it because throughout 2017, while Ben was gone, and up until just the last couple weeks, I had the best hair in this movement. And now I got some run for my money. And seriously though, I think I get more compliments on my hair than anybody who's ever read my books or my journalism or anything like that. Thanks, I appreciate it. Maybe check out my work when you're done. So it's been an interesting year, and now we're at the point where we can start to reflect on what happened in the last year. Look at ourselves, look at our movement, and ask, what is the best way to move forward? And I'll get that first slide back up. And this brings me to my talk, which is, why are all the anarchists so fucked up? Now, obviously, I chose a provocative title. I could have said, why are all the anarchists so emotionally complex and vulnerable? Why do they shoot themselves in the foot? Why are they self-destructive? But this seems a little bit more appropriate. And I include myself in that. Don't for 1 second think that I'm not including myself in that. I am also, along with you, fucked up, and a human being. Obviously that title could say, why are all the human beings messed up? But we're focused here on the anarchists in our movement specifically today. And the reason I wanted to put it that way, to be a little bit provocative and get your attention, is because I believe that and my message is all about that we're all in need of healing. We have plenty of people here who are talking about politics, economics, some really important research on just the truth of our world and conspiracies and all kinds of different things. People who've dedicated years of their life, decades of their lives to researching this information and putting it out to people in the form of videos and books and talks and all this kind of thing. And for one reason or another, we are drawn to that lifestyle, and that has allowed us to come be on this stage and present information to you. But I think it's important for us to remember that nobody on this stage, nobody, including myself, who's going to speak to you over the next few days, is any different than anybody who's in the audience. Like, you need to remember that, because even within a movement, you know, an anarchist movement, there are people who are still followers. And you know, I've noticed that for years, that, okay, well, I guess maybe it's good that they're following the good guys right now, but eventually we really need to get them to start thinking for themselves more. And I still see some of that. So it's just important to acknowledge that. And you guys who have paid to be here and are spending your time and traveling here, you're no different than me or any of these people are. Despite what some of these speakers might want you to believe, even, and try to elevate themselves on a pedestal, like, don't do that, don't allow that. We're all the same in this. We're all searching for healing and working. And the reason I say that is because, the reason I say that is because, how do I make these slides come back when I want them? This is confusing. Okay, there you go. Thank you, whoever did that. So the reason I say that is because my work focuses on not just looking at, you know, the politics, the economics, and the philosophy. I definitely spend my time on that. Last year, this was my talk that focused on what I call vertical and horizontal agorism. Shout out to all agorists in the room, counter economics. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Those are the solutions I believe in, the physical and the real, you know, the practical interacting with other human beings. Opting out, not paying taxes, growing your own food, you know, getting communities built, opting out in every area of our lives, not just when it comes to government, but from all the systems that do not represent the values and the principles that we want to live and the way we want to see our lives. It's more than just the government, in case you guys haven't got that yet. There's other forms of oppression. So that's what I focused on last year, and I still believe in that. My book that I put out last year about this time, Manifesto of the Free Humans, is all about that for those who want to go down that rabbit hole. But today we're going to spend more time looking at the emotional side of things and looking at what happens if we only focus on these things and we don't do that internal work. Well, I believe we're going to end up creating a world, maybe it'll take a little while, a couple generations, before we become the tyrants that we've been fighting ourselves. If we each continue to ignore the necessary healing that we each need to go through, if we just ignore that and continue through our lives without actually working on ourselves and doing the difficult, very difficult, often healing process, then how long before we become the tyrants that we've been fighting, you know? I think that it'll only take a couple generations, if that. So today we're focused now on the more emotional battleground and how we can get through that. And for me, this has come into a workbook that I call the Holistic Self-Assessment. And I actually just released that this morning. It's available for free to download on my website. And it's a short guidebook for people to take themselves through understanding what their principles are, what their goals are, what their habits, and look at their relationships, and look for inconsistencies, and look for areas that don't align, and being able to address them. And not so me or anybody else can judge you and say, you're living wrong, you know, you're not you're not a good person, you're not an anarchist or whatever, but so you can acknowledge that and say, wow, like, okay, I've got some inconsistencies staring me in the face. I can make a choice now. Do I really want to live in line with these values that I claim? Do I really want to pursue this path? Do I really want to change the world? Or is this just something that I like to do once a year and come to these anarchist conferences to, you know, party and have fun? Because I don't know about you guys, but I actually would like to see the world change. Like, there's a lot of beautiful kids here. We need to change the world for them, you know? And to do that, we have to do the work within ourselves. It doesn't come down to just, you know, it's not just about opting out, but it's also about opting in, I guess you could say, focusing on our internal world. So for this self-assessment, it starts with the principles, which here, I'm speaking to an audience that is very much, I think, aware of what principles are and what our guiding principles are. There you go. And so a principle, of course, it's a rule or something that governs your behavior, your actions. Most of us here, we understand ideas like the non-aggression principle. I also just think about it in terms of the golden rule, right? Because this assessment that I'm releasing, it's not just meant for anarchists, it's meant for a mainstream audience. Because I believe that if we help people establish what their principles are, I don't know if you recognize this, but some people have never even asked themselves, what is a principle, let alone what are the principles that guide their actions. They're just living every day and taking actions. But when you step back and you look at it, you might realize, okay, I'm all over the place. Like, I have this stated goal, but then my actions don't reflect that, you know? And it's not always an easy task to do that, and some people don't find themselves in that position. So I'm trying to encourage that. Look at your principles. What is a principle, first of all, right? And what principles guide you? The golden rule is one that I think is really important. And from there, I don't know how to make this thing come back. Can we just keep that on there? I don't need to see myself there. All right, so after principles, after the golden rule, of course, something else that I explore and I think that you guys all understand is self-ownership, right? Obviously, despite what some people may attempt to say, libertarianism is about self-ownership. Private property and all that is derived from the fact that you own yourself. And so we can't really get any further than that. We can recognize, okay, the golden rule, I don't want to treat other people the way I don't want to be treated, and I recognize that I own myself and so other people own themselves as well, and obviously we understand the implications of that. These are the ideas that I'm trying to, trying to get people to understand that all liberty is derived from self-ownership. So you have the golden rule, you've got self-ownership. I know this is, I'm preaching to the choir on these points. But another point that I think is really important that I'm trying to promote is something that's known as the 7th generation principle. And it comes from the Iroquois mainly, but it's also in a lot of indigenous cultures and traditions around the world. And it's basically the idea that instead of just being, thinking arrogantly about what's taking place right in front of you and only thinking that, starting to think of how your actions and your behavior today affect not just your children and your children's children, but the 7 generations coming. And obviously, when you really take that in, and you really take that in along with self-ownership, along with the golden rule, it changes the way you live your life. You start looking at every area of your life and asking, like, is this action going to affect somebody down the line and screw them over? And it doesn't have to involve statism. That's the beautiful thing, is if each of us start living these principles, we can show people there's no need for a government to come in and be mommy, daddy, and try to be that central figure that can help save the planet or can correct people's behavior. We can be the ones to do it ourselves. So, the golden rule, self-ownership, 7th generation principle, these are principles, guiding principles that I try to live by, and my hope is that by just bringing this to people's attention, asking what is a principle first, defining that for them, getting them to look at that, well, even if they don't ever call themselves anarchists or libertarians, they're going to understand the concepts. And that's all I really care about. I don't care if you wear an A on your chest, if you label yourself that in your regular life, as long as we have more people in the world coexisting and recognizing that we don't need force in order to communicate and to cooperate, to get things done, that we don't need this institution known as government. That, I think, is moving the ball forward, even if they never end up at Anarchapulco. They understand the concept, and that's what really matters. So, after principles, I start looking at our goals. And, a goal is something, it's an object that you want to possess, an experience you want to have, it's something that you want to bring in towards your life, right? So, you establish your principles, you see what guides you, and then you look towards your goals, right? And perhaps your goal is something simple and mundane, like you want to lose 10 pounds by the end of the summer, right? But then as you move forward and we move into habits, you start looking at your habits, and your habits are sleeping all day, eating pizza all the time, and not, doing nothing to make that goal happen, right? Obviously, you're never going to achieve that. There's a disconnect, there's an inconsistency there. Now let's think bigger. If your goal is, I want to create a free society, I want to leave the world better than I found it, I want to be a sustainable farmer, I want to raise a family, whatever you have, and then you look at your habits though, and you're not actually taking steps towards that goal. In fact, maybe your habits are actually moving you in the opposite direction. You're never going to, you're never going to get there. And it seems very simple, but often in our daily waking life, we don't recognize these inconsistencies unless we stop and ask ourselves, okay, do the things I claim to want to be about, am I actually living them? Am I actually taking steps in that direction, or am I simply just talking a big game? Like, I don't know. Again, this is not just a hobby for me. When I woke up in 2009 and started to get involved in activism, I didn't plan to get into journalism or, okay, cool, I'll do this for a few years, and then people will start asking me to come speak, and then I can travel to Mexico and hang out on the beach. Yeah, that'll be a nice plan. I did it because I was freaking the hell out about what was going on in the world, and I wanted to find other people, and I wanted to connect. And in the process, I learned that I had a lot of personal work to do in order to be out there. Before I'm talking to anybody, I need to work on myself. And it's sort of my theory that I think those of us who find ourselves on this stage, maybe we're the ones who need the help the most. That's why we're so loud. We're so loud and vocal about it, because we're like, come help me, like I'm freaking out, I need to fix the world, but I need to fix myself. So we're very loud and vocal, but again, we need as much help and healing as everybody else in this movement. So you look at your goals, and you start looking at your habits, and you're identifying these inconsistencies. And again, in this assessment that I've released, It's a set of questions and introduces these concepts. We look at the definitions of these words in a very simple fashion and get people to ask these and reflect on, okay, where do I really want to live this goal? Maybe you look at your goals and you look at your habits and you're like, you know what, actually changing the world, you know, being a better person, that sounds like a lot of work. Like, I thought I wanted it, but forget it, I'll go somewhere else, right? Obviously, my hope is that you recognize, okay, there's some changes that need to be made. If I'm going to achieve this goal of mine, then my habits are going to need to change. And if I want to live in line with these principles that I claim to have, then I want my goals to align with that, and I want my habits to align with that. So you start doing this introspection and personal work in order to get there. And then from there, we move into the holistic perspective. So I don't know if you guys have heard me use this phrase over the last year, but with the release of the last book, I've been calling this the holistic anarchism, or holistic activism, if you're not an anarchist. Because what it really means, what the definition of holistic is about, is instead of focusing on specific individual systems, you're looking at the whole system, right? So when it comes to holistic ecology, it's a study of not just the environment, but also the environment and how it works with humanity together as one system, right? There's holistic psychology, you know, people know about holistic medicine, the study of the whole body rather than just treating the symptom. So when it comes to holistic anarchism or holistic activism, the idea then is to look at all areas of your life, not just focus on the politics, not just focus on the economics, but again, look at the way you're actually living your life and ask if you're in line with those principles and those values that you're claiming to be, or if you just talk a big game. Because it's easy to understand them, it's easy to repeat them, it's easy to make videos about them, and it's even easy to write books about them. But it's a lot more difficult to actually live them, and that's what I think, that's how we're actually going to move this movement forward, is if we are actually living these principles. You take it forever on that. Alright, so then there's another example, holistic. You're looking at your physical body, your emotional, your spiritual world, your intellectual, and you're trying to make all these areas aligned with your principles, not just, you know, what you say, not just what you project on social media, because, you know, there's a theory that we each have a self that we put in front of people, like for example right here, this is the self I'm projecting to you on the front stage, but right behind stage I also have another self, my more private self, right? So it's easy to project an image on stage to people when we meet them and we connect with them, but behind closed doors be different, you know, and you want to align those two worlds to make the person you are behind closed doors privately the same person that you are publicly. You know, that's when you're living, I think, in line with your values. And so that's holistic anarchism, and that symbol there basically just represents all those little areas, or just different vectors of your life: economy, relationships, food, the type of food you eat, where your food's derived from, the systems that you support through food. I don't know if you guys know, but the massive amount of waste and destructive mainstream industrial farming food production systems, which are supported through statism, are completely destructive, not just, you know, to animals and to the environment, but, you know, I'd say to our health as well. So these areas are equally important. It goes much further than just the role of government. Also, so you're looking at holistic, right? You start looking at the kind of food that you eat. I definitely think it's important, and, you know, I'm just going to say it. Some of you guys eat like shit. I mean, we understand, okay, I got the economy figured out, I understand the ins and outs of the non-aggression principle, now let me go to McDonald's and support this and just stuff some poison down my mouth. And I'm not attacking anybody, I'm just saying, if you're thinking holistically, which I think will actually move us closer towards our goals, then again, look at all the different areas of your life and ask yourself who you're supporting through those decisions. You know, when you eat, when you communicate with somebody, the clothes you buy, the way you communicate with yourself. You know, I talked a lot about my struggle with, you know, depression, suicide, and those sort of things, is because I had this internal conversation that was just horrible to myself, you know, and that was what was on repeat all the time, just that I was dealing with, and programming myself with that mentality. So you have to look at these different areas, look holistically at your life, and see if you can work towards becoming more in line with those values. Meditation as well, I think, is a big important practice, and it doesn't necessarily need to look like that. I think some people, I've realized over the years, some people are intimidated by the idea of meditation, but it's not always sitting cross-legged in lotus position, you know, like zenning out. It can be, like for me, it's a bike ride. It can be even just finding 5 to 10 minutes at the end of your day to sit in quiet reflection, think about everything that took place from the moment you woke up to the moment you're going to sleep, and pausing to reflect on that. Pausing before you eat your food. You don't have to call it prayer or whatever you want, but just stop and like, thank you to the person that just served me this food. Thank you to the person that grew this food. Thank you to the earth for providing everything I need, and thank you to this food for keeping me alive. I mean, those simple things, those simple practices, it's mindfulness, it's awareness. I guarantee you these can help you in other areas. And then when you're dealing with the status, you're like, okay, let me bring myself back to Zen place. Okay, let me see if I can communicate and learn something from this. Is there any way to effectively get my point across without calling them a moron? No, okay, I think I'll just block them. All right. Obviously, yoga, physical exercise, these kind of things, these are important as well. The relationships, this is the most important point. I know I'm getting low on time. The relationships that we have, again, with ourselves, with the people around us, this is where we really show whether or not anarchism can happen, right? Because everybody, I mean, if you've ever tried to argue for a stateless society or anything close to it, people are like, show me where it's happened. Show me where we haven't killed each other, where we haven't lived without a government. Well, the reason that is because there's a lot of people that are fucked up out there and they're hurt. Like I said, we all need healing, and hurt people hurt people. So the world is out there hurt. We're trying to tell each other how to live their lives because we don't have control of our own lives, and everybody's just going after each other. So they can't even imagine that this could really exist. How do we change that? We become better people. We work on ourselves. We show people examples of what it could look like. That's how we're going to change the world. We're going to work on ourselves, and we're going to be every day working to be better examples of what a free person can be like, what a person who is focused on healing internally and dealing. And you know what? We all have different struggles. I don't expect that everybody has experienced some of the extremes that I have, and I know there's some people who've experienced things much more traumatic than I have. But we all have different doubts, fears, and insecurities. I don't care who you are, and I can tell you this, the people that are on this stage that I've come to know personally, they also have doubts and fears and insecurities too. Don't let them fool you, okay? We all have them in different ways. They express themselves in different ways, we work on them in different ways, or maybe we suppress them and ignore them in different ways. Drugs was my method of choice. But at the end, it's all about that we have things to heal from. Some may be more traumatic, they may be different, but at the end of the day, if we focus on that, our efforts can lead us to a better place. And we can actually start to create relationships that are based on compassion and empathy and respect. And you know, it may sound, I know there's some people like, oh, so this guy thinks all we need to do is meditate and the state's going to go away and the immigration's going to stop, whatever, right? Okay. No, that's not what I'm saying. You still need to opt out of the state at every turn. Stop paying taxes. Stop paying taxes. Stop paying taxes. Please stop fucking paying taxes. And stop supporting the systems that you don't support. You know, vote every single day with your mouth, with your word, with your actions, with your very being. Vote every day by the relationships you choose, by the food you choose, and every action that you take. Think, is this in line with what I believe? Is this going to move me closer to the goal? And I'm not saying that we can be perfect. This is a very complex, difficult world to achieve this, but we can move in that direction. And if we're all working on that, we're going to do something beautiful. We already are. I mean, look at this. There's people from all over the world here today. We have an opportunity to take this, not just make this be some, you know, weekend vacation and go back to living our lives, but to actually go home and integrate these ideas that you're about to hear over the next few days, and the ideas that I'm sharing, and change our freaking lives and change the world. I mean, maybe that's just a pipe dream. I really don't know that we can ever achieve a completely libertarian world, but I do think that we can achieve a much more ethical world with less violence, and maybe we can at least go create our own little bubbles in the world and try to defend it as best as we can. And the other thing is, along with talking about meditation and all the internal work, this is what I believe in: the sovereignty of the individual, the non-aggression principle, self-ownership, permagore, which is combining permaculture with agorism, mindfulness, all the things we just talked about, combined with the agorist philosophy and counter-economics, goes to what I call the conscious agora. That is the place I'm headed. I want to go there with you. I want you to come with me. I want to build it with you. And I see Terry walking up. I got two more, Terry. I'm almost done. Okay, so look, this is the end right here, guys. Thank you. Oh, going the wrong way. I'm not good at this thing. Okay, so you guys see where I'm headed, right? This is a quote from the new book that just came out this morning. It's available to download. Please download it. I'm seeking a physical publisher. I'm not going to self-publish this one because I think it has a chance to go to a mainstream audience, much bigger than just our humble movement. And I believe then can help more people find their principles and their values. Just remember, you're not your job, you're not your relationships, you're not your physical or mental traits. You're something much more. You're bigger than these categories. It's important to recognize these are only a small piece of who you are as beautiful, powerful, free human beings. The more honest you are, the more you learn about yourself, and the greater the opportunity for growth. This is, the last slide is a picture of the cover of the book. No, that's not. But that's pretty much what I got for you guys. I just want to end. I want to end it the same way I always do. If you please just fill this freaking awesome room up with so much, just recognize the potential and the power in yourself. My God, we can do so much if we just believe in ourselves. Please please repeat this positive affirmation with me if you feel inclined, and I appreciate your time. I am powerful. I am beautiful. And I am free. Thank you, guys.
Derrick Broze, ladies and gentlemen. Peace, love, and anarchy.